BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
From BBC Radio 4, this is Things Fell Apart, Season 2. This story starts with four people who shouldn't have anything in common, besides them all being accomplished in their very different fields and them all wanting to play a part in a more sustainable future. But in fact, they have something quite startling in common. There's Duncan.
My name is Duncan Enright. I'm a counsellor in Oxfordshire.
There's James.
I'm James Stallworth. I'm the co-founder of Brownstone Shared Housing.
There's Ida.
My name is Ida Auken. I am a member of the Danish Parliament.
And there's Joseph.
I'm Joseph Yoon from Brooklyn Bugs, and I'm an edible insect ambassador.
Until recently, Duncan was responsible for improving Oxford's traffic flow strategy.
All the places I can think of who've had real problems with transport have been those with old infrastructure but modern levels of traffic. And one of the things that limits people's opportunities is being able to travel. So people get stuck. And I was one of them. Often would get stuck in traffic and often wouldn't be home until the kids were in bed. And that's not how life should be. So I was determined to do something about that.
Duncan's solution was to find ways to make bus travel more inviting.
That meant bringing forward an idea of some filters around the city of Oxford in order to make sure that the buses got through quick, but also it becomes very attractive compared to cars.
Over in San Francisco, James from Brownstone Shared Housing had his own problem to solve, because after he and his partner had graduated college,
We're couch surfing and doing anything just to be able to live near where we need to be. Of course, the rent is too high, but building in California or New York is very difficult and takes years, so it's kind of a pipe dream is the way that we saw it.
hence their idea.
We created what we called sleeping pods. It resembles more the capsule hotels you see in Japan. We put these beds in existing homes so we could charge a fraction of what rent typically costs. We have dimmable lights, fans, a place to plug in electronics. So it's not just a box to sleep in.
Over in Brooklyn, Joseph was considering how he, as a chef, could help combat world hunger and global warming, and his solution.
I learned that there are over 2 billion people already consuming edible insects. What if we were to incorporate edible insects just once a week? Similar to Meatless Mondays, we could have like Buggy Tuesdays.
And so Joseph became an edible insect chef, often cooking for up to 1,000 curious people at a time. So give me some examples of the kind of dishes that you'll make with, say, cricket. So we're talking like sweet and savoury?
If we were talking about breakfast, maybe I'll make yogurt with cricket granola. If we're talking about lunch, maybe I'll make cream of mushroom soup and utilize cricket stock as the base.
And then there was Ida from the Danish Parliament. At just 33, Ida had become Denmark's Minister for the Environment. She regularly attends high-level invite-only meetings like the World Economic Forum's Davos conference, where, she says, she tries to engage attendees like the heads of BP and Chevron into becoming more environmentally aware, mostly to no avail.
The biggest problem for World Economic Forum is there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of convening, but it's not always turned into action.
Still, she perseveres. And in 2016, the World Economic Forum invited Ida to write an essay for their website.
It was a task that I was assigned from World Economic Forum to imagine a city in the year 2030. And I thought, why not take a trend that I saw was spreading, namely that products were being turned into services, like people renting out their homes via Airbnb or using Uber instead of owning their own cars. So I thought, let's try and imagine what really happened if every product is a service waiting to happen.
And so Ida wrote her essay, imagining a future time when we would own nothing, not even a right to privacy.
This was a thought experiment. I even remember that I had sort of an extra line writing, "This is not my vision or my utopia. It is a thought experiment trying to see some of the pros and cons of the sharing economy."
Ida's 2016 essay was received very well. It got translated into something like 12 languages. She was happy she'd done it. At first. So, 4 people with little in common except a desire to play a part in a more sustainable future, until they suddenly had something else in common. One day, Duncan was holding a community meeting at Chipping Norton Town Hall, an Oxfordshire market town, population 5,800. Everything seemed normal, except it was a full house, 150 people, which was unusual, but Duncan felt gratifying for a Wednesday afternoon.
Oh, we probably talked about things like the leisure centre in Chipping Norton, which needs a new roof and is getting one, that kind of thing.
But then,
halfway through the meeting, several people stood up and started shouting, and there was a real hubbub, and they were talking about the Great Reset. I'd never heard of it before that point.
It was strange and alarming. Duncan was being shouted at by people calling his traffic filter scheme part of a plot to lock them in their homes, a plot they called the Great Reset.
They were talking about this Klaus Schwab, never heard of him. They talked about the World Economic Forum. I have heard of that, but I thought it was this meeting of business leaders and government leaders in Davos. That's the only time I'd come across it. And they were saying, you want to stop us going more than 15 minutes from our homes. At that point, the leader said, OK, I think we probably all have a cup of tea, so we'll just have a bit of a recess for a moment.
It wasn't only Duncan getting accused of conspiring in this thing he had never heard of, the Great Reset. There was James in San Francisco.
So everything was fine. We were operating for a year to little fanfare. The house was 100% occupied. And one day the news ran with the story about people sleeping in pods in Palo Alto. But it just started to go really viral to a weird extent for us. We were wondering, well, it's interesting, but it's not that interesting. Why is it spreading like this? And so we looked on Twitter and saw the majority of the noise was essentially implying that we were forcing people into these pods, which we thought was strange.
James Googled and found conspiracy sites about his pod company that spiraled into all kinds of directions.
Going into the Great Reset and the WEF, they had somehow connected that to pods and bugs and forcing people to live in pods. And then I thought, okay, so now that's probably what's behind this.
James was finding the accusations bemusing, not least because of why they'd come up with the term pods to begin with.
Both my co-founder and I were big fans of 2001 Space Odyssey. The pod there being central to that.
Right. Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
Yes, exactly.
And Hal says, I'm afraid that's not possible. And the people on Twitter were like equating you with Hal, refusing to open the pod bay doors.
Yeah, it's very ironic in that regard.
So why was this happening? Why were James and Duncan and, as we'll see, Ida and Joseph the insect chef all getting bombarded with similarly bewildering accusations that they were foot soldiers in a plot called the Great Reset? To answer that, let me take you to a mountaintop in the French Alps in early March 2020, a week before lockdown.
I'm Thierry Malray. I'm an entrepreneur based in Chamonix-Mont-Blanc, which is a mountain resort in the French Alps, and I have several businesses.
For a number of years, Thierry ran the World Economic Forum's Davos conference, bringing together politicians like Ida with corporate giants like BP and Pfizer for talks and backroom meetings intended to, quote, improve the state of the world. He produces a newsletter about macroeconomics called the Monthly Barometer that gets sent to 3,000 decision makers and private investors around the world. And he has another business,
which consists in going to the mountains to learn from the high mountains lessons that can be applied to the world of decision-making in business and investment terms.
How does that work? What is it about the mountains that can work in that way?
Well, in the mountain, you learn how to make decisions very fast, and hopefully good decisions, because otherwise you're in trouble. You have to trust the people who are on your rope. It's much, much better to think when you're in nature.
Thierry was climbing a mountain one day in early March 2020, a week before lockdown, when his phone rang.
I was ski touring. I was on my way up the mountains with my wife, this friend, and I got a phone from Klaus Schwab.
Klaus Schwab being the founder of the World Economic Forum, where Thierry had worked for some years. They discussed how the pandemic was looming towards them and what that might mean.
I studied a bit of history, and I knew that every time a pandemic occurs, it's a momentous event. Things are going to change in many different ways, radically.
Thierry means like how, after the Black Death in the 1300s, the surviving workers realised they could demand shorter hours and higher pay, and so feudalism began to crumble.
So I thought, like all pandemics, such a momentous event can play a key role in creating conditions for new policies. And I thought, surely this is an opportunity to write a book about what might be coming after the pandemic.
So you needed a title.
So, of course, we needed a title, yeah.
So what did you come up with?
Well, we came up with a Great Reset.
Was that your title?
Absolutely. I had it in my mind from the outset. It's punchy. It means exactly what it says. People understand it because of this IT metaphor that you use when you have to reset a computer. And I thought it would work well.
Do you remember where you were when you thought that's the perfect title?
I'm sure I was in the mountains because I tend to work while walking.
Their book about how the pandemic could lead us to a, quote, better form of capitalism and a fairer, healthier planet was launched in a grand way, with testimonials by the then Prince Charles.
We have an incredible opportunity to create entirely new sustainable industries, investing in nature as the true engine of our economy.
And Klaus Schwab himself.
We are at a turning point of humankind.
And then there was Grover from Sesame Street, making a guest appearance on the World Economic Forum's Great Reset podcast.
Hello, everybody. It is I, your cute and adorable pal Grover. You are in luck because I know a thing or two about resetting. I reset my alarm clock every morning. But you are talking about resetting the entire world. Now that is a very big job.
How long did it take you to bring the book out?
Very fast, 3 months.
Wow.
Not even.
My God, it could take me that amount of time to write a paragraph.
It's funny you're saying that because, so it took us 3 months. It was a collaboration, of course, between Klaus and myself. And when the first conspiracy theories emerged, they were based on the wrong observation that it's impossible to write a book in 3 months.
Oh, were people saying that you engineered like...
Exactly. The book had been prepared well in advance for the time when the pandemic would be created by this cabal of elite people.
Because after the successful launch, things turned bad fast. On the left, writers like Naomi Klein attacked the Great Reset as a PR smokescreen, a place where, quote, heads of transnational oil giants opine about the urgent need to tackle climate change. On the conspiratorial right, the criticisms were more baroque. Despite, or in part because, of Sesame Street's Grover, they grabbed hold of the Great Reset and wouldn't let go.
Monday morning, the phrase "the Great Reset" trended with nearly 80,000 tweets, with most of the posts coming from familiar far-right internet personalities. I wonder if that's us.
They've actually infiltrated themselves in Sesame Street. They're going after kids. They want kids to know this phrase, the Great Reset, because it means woke ideology.
To many, this sounds like something straight out of George Orwell's 1984, but I believe an even better guidepost would be the Book of Revelation and the coming Antichrist-led system.
When did you first realise that some people saw the title, The Great Reset, as sinister rather than optimistic?
I think it was 4, 5, 6 months after the publication of the book. I got a phone call from a friend in the United States who told me, "Oh, you are on Fox News." And in the morning, I looked at Amazon and saw that the book, which was doing reasonably well, was doing fantastically well. I think we became number one instantly in the US.
Wow.
And that was the beginning of this crazy conspiracy around the book.
People were hate buying it.
Absolutely. That was my assumption.
I guess hate buying is still buying, but nonetheless.
Yeah.
Nobody eats bugs voluntarily. They're filthy. People need to be persuaded to give up meat, and if necessary, forced.
This is Tucker Carlson's Fox documentary about the Great Reset called Let Them Eat Bugs.
We know what you're feeling. Repulsion, right?
There was nothing in Thierry's book about bug eating, but the World Economic Forum had published an article about how by 2050 we'll need to feed 2 billion more people with only 4% of arable land remaining, and maybe edible insects are the answer. Joseph, the edible insect chef, appears in the documentary, although he now believes...
The documentary is a hit piece. It is a hit piece on the World Economic Forum. It's a hit piece on edible insects. It kind of just unravels, in my opinion.
Many believe that Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum is the globe's biggest bug pusher. Replacing beef with crickets appears to be the end stage of the Great Reset, the part where they take control even of the food you eat.
The Great Reset had become an obsession on the right. Practically every talk show host was taking the lead from one another, all of them scouring the World Economic Forum's website for essays that might sound terrifying with the right spin. Here's Osama bin Laden's niece, Noor, a beloved figure on the conspiratorial right, on Steve Bannon's show, The War Room.
My name is Noor bin Laden. I am a human being, not a QR code. I don't want to eat the bugs. I don't want to live in the pod. I don't want to be trapped in a digital jail, and nothing they can do will make me.
And here's Alex Jones speculating wildly about a World Economic Forum essay extolling a future world where everything we need could be found within 15 minutes of our homes.
Total surveillance, just absolute hell. And everybody else isn't allowed in and you're not allowed out. You get to leave your 15-minute city 100 times a year in Oxford. But after that, you get penalized on your social credit score. They're really prison cities. It's put out by the Davos Group. Not just saying you'll own nothing and like it. They explain this will save the earth. Just bizarre tyranny.
Hence Duncan being yelled at Chipping Norton Town Hall. The protesters had somehow connected his bus lane proposals to their 15-minute city idea, even though the two things had nothing to do with one another.
It's weird that something as mundane and rather dull as traffic management should be dragged into this.
But dragged in it was. Thousands of protesters held a march through Oxford. Some of them held up wanted placards with Duncan's face on them. They'd been influenced by many thought leaders on the right, all of them echoing one another's accusations about Duncan and his plans. These were hugely successful podcasters and writers like Alex Jones, Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson.
I hadn't really come across Jordan Peterson before this whole episode, and yet I understand that he was one of the things that sort of brought me to attention.
This is actually the second time Jordan Peterson's been mentioned in this series. The first time he was advising young men to be less schlubby.
Make a plan. Get disciplined about something.
You may recall Jordan Peterson from my episode about the men arrested for plotting to kidnap the governor of Michigan. Like so many other culture war leaders, he hardened during lockdown, evolving from offering sensible advice for young men into something else entirely. So it shows the sort of arc of his evolution, that he went from telling people to dress well and sit up straight to spreading conspiracy theories about you.
Wow.
Jordan Peterson had posted Duncan's traffic proposal on Twitter, calling him and his colleagues idiot tyrannical bureaucrats. Make no mistake, he wrote in a tweet viewed 7.5 million times. It's part of a well-documented plan. Death threats started pouring in. To Duncan.
I had one from somebody I don't know at all that said, "Your time will come, sunshine."
And to James in San Francisco.
So the way that our website works is you apply to live in the house. We ask for their job, and their job that they put was killing hipster scum like you.
But that was nothing compared to what Ida from the Danish Parliament was going through. If you recall, Ida wrote a thought experiment essay for the World Economic Forum's website, imagining a city in 2030 where products have become services and nobody owns anything.
So online it's had a huge impact, but it's also had an impact on my life in the sense that I've gotten several death threats. I've had to ask the police here, am I endangered in any way because of this?
It was the World Economic Forum who first suggested Ida write her essay, which gets us into a somewhat uncomfortable area. How much of the conspiratorial chaos was brought on by the World Economic Forum itself. Take the title of Ida's essay.
World Economic Forum, the editor there gave it a very provocative title.
What was the title that they gave it?
They gave it the title, Welcome to 2030, I own nothing, I have no privacy and life has never been better. That title was not mine. And I'm sure the title in itself sort of made things explode because it's very provocative. This title is literally just one person working in their communication department who thought it was fun. And I thought it was fun too, so yeah. I'd never in my wildest dream imagined that it would become this huge thing.
To help publicise Ida's article, the World Economic Forum had released a Facebook video called 8 Predictions for the World in 2030. The first image in the video is a picture of a man smiling with the words, "You'll own nothing and you'll be happy."
I thought it was actually coming out of the conspiracy theorists, that video, but it was the forum itself.
Yes. I can't help thinking that if Ida herself can't tell the difference between the World Economic Forum's own promotional video for her essay and a conspiracy theorist's video designed to make it seem terrifying, the World Economic Forum weren't doing a great job.
People say the World Economic Forum, it doesn't have power. Yes, it does. It has some of the most powerful people from all over the world.
This is Glenn Beck, the hugely influential right-wing talk show host, formerly of Fox News and now with his own network, The Blaze. Glenn was so outraged by Thierry's book, he wrote his own book in response, called The Great Reset, Joe Biden and the Rise of 21st Century Fascism. It became an instant New York Times bestseller.
It's terrifying to me because I don't want to call them Nazis, although Klaus Schwab is like a cartoon of a James Bond bad guy. He's a little white kitty cat in his lap away from being a movie villain. But I don't want to call them Nazis because that's so easy and simple and it takes you only in one direction. But we have seen this kind of arrogance before when you take government, philosophers, the arrogance of academia, if you will, then you mix in pharmaceutical companies, and you come up with horribly dangerous things because people convince themselves that they're right. They can build the right human. They just have to tweak people. They just have to control people. And that seems to be almost codified in you will have nothing and you'll like it.
That came from an essay written by Ida Orkin. And you mentioned Ida Orkin in your book. What can you remember about that?
Well, they have called this all a conspiracy theory and they wiped it from, but the internet is forever, dummies.
Glenn's right that you can't find Ida's essay on the World Economic Forum's website anymore. But according to Ida, it isn't for reasons of subterfuge, but because
I asked them to take it down at some point when it got weaponized by conspiracy theorists. We decided to take it offline because it wasn't bringing anything good for the world or for me or for the forum. Online, it doesn't matter what I'm discussing, somebody will pop up, but what about you can't own anything? There are people showing up when I give talks, almost shouting at me.
I own my land. I own my car. I own things. Our whole society is built on ownership. It's what drove America for a long time before we became insane. And that is, I can make my own way. What happens to the Western way of life when that idea is completely scratched? Well, I think we're about to find out, because that's what they're trying to do.
I talked to Ida Orkin, the woman who wrote that original essay.
Wow.
And I felt sympathy. She said it was only ever intended to be a thought experiment about what life would be like in 10 years' time if all products became services.
Sure.
And she said she wasn't even necessarily in favour of it herself. And in fact, she even wrote a disclaimer saying, I'm not even sure that I agree with this utopian idea.
But hang on just a second, John. I hope you never got the impression that I was condemning her. I'm condemning the fact that there are so many people latching on going, yes, that's a great idea. We should be able to have philosophical discussion. I should be able to argue both sides of this.
Even so, Glenn's language about the Great Reset is intemperate. He calls it fascism and writes that it could, quote, finally snuff out the flame of liberty in America and indeed the entire world. The stakes have never been higher.
Because everyone has been pushed to the brink. The world has already started to go over the edge. What do desperate, hungry, frightened people do when they trust no one? So I am warning, like the Great Reset, look, this is the truth. This is what's happening.
Personally, I don't think the Great Reset is as frightening as Glenn is making out, despite the World Economic Forum's own, sometimes alarming-sounding messaging, a mistake they acknowledged themselves in a promotional video in 2021.
With everything falling apart, we can reshape the world in ways we couldn't before.
And that's why so many are calling for a Great Reset.
A Great Reset? That sounds more like buzzword bingo masking some nefarious plan for world domination. Hands up, this kind of slogan hasn't gone down well. But all we really want to say is that we all have an opportunity to build a better world.
Ida also has some regrets of her own.
I'm not in love with that essay. And it's not the best thing I ever wrote, but it was a thought experiment and it was fun at that time. And I think I learned something too from the way it was too easy to weaponize that. And if you're a politician, maybe you should not pretend you're Asimov or any kind of sci-fi writer, you know, maybe just stick to the boring reports. And
I gotta say, the World Economic Forum aren't great with titles, because they came up with the title The Great Reset too, which if you're a conspiracy theorist, couldn't sound more terrifying.
Yes, it does sound a little bit terrifying. It's a gift for them. Yes, I agree. So was my title, apparently.
I wondered if Thierry, who co-authored the book The Great Reset, felt the same way. That maybe from his vantage point up in the mountains, he and Klaus Schwab had lost track a little of how their messaging was coming across. A lot has been made about the title. People have said the title is kind of like a conspiracy theorist's nightmare. These elitists are going to reset everything. I mean, the Great Reset definitely doesn't play well for all demographics.
Well, I don't know. This is a question that is to be asked to the conspiracy people.
Looking back, you know, because it all became so huge, is there anything that you would do differently now?
No. If it gave rise to this crazy conspiracy series, it's too bad. It was completely out of my control. People pick and choose where to direct their anger in this world. It can be a book, it can be anything. So, no, I wouldn't change anything.
Not even the title?
Not even the title. I think the title was good.
Despite these seemingly intractable positions, I want to end the story with a moment that strikes me as strangely hopeful. If you recall, during my interview with Glenn Beck, he'd been talking angrily about Ida's essay.
They just have to tweak people. They just have to control people. And that seems to be almost codified in You Will Have Nothing and You'll Like It.
But then I told him that I'd spoken to Ida.
Wow.
She said it was only ever intended to be a thought experiment about what life would be like in 10 years' time if all products became services.
Sure. But hang on just a second, John. I hope you never got the impression that I was condemning her.
Glenn's abrupt change in tone after I'd reminded him that Ida was real and nuanced reminded me a lot of something that Ida had said to me.
I remember the first time I had a death threat from someone who had read my piece. And he said, "That is probably the most fascist thing I've ever read. Please go and kill yourself." And I answered him, "Thank you for your email. That telling other people to kill themselves because you disagree is probably the most fascist thing I ever heard." And then he was like, "You're a real person. I'm so sorry. I thought you were like this puppet."
I think this happens a lot when a person takes the risk of engaging with their critics. When the cold anonymity of the internet is replaced by human connection, the rage can subside very quickly. Although, to be honest, those good times don't always last very long.
So I've actually found sometimes that it has made sense to talk to some of these conspiracy believers also on the street. But next time I meet them and I can recognize them because they're like 20, 30 people here in Denmark, they're back and they're still shouting.
I know what you mean. I've done a similar thing. Like if somebody's attacked me, from time to time, I'll talk to them and for a little while it really works. And then they're back to shouting at you again.
Yeah, it's funny that that's the same experience. It's a very mean atmosphere that can be created. And it's impossible to kind of break through that armor of conviction that everybody is lying to them.
Next time, in the final episode of Things Fell Apart, how a former actor and model burned by Hollywood and devastated by the death of his brother has become a leading culture warrior, fueling the flames of every story we tell this season. Things Fell Apart was written and presented by me, Jon Ronson, and produced by Sarah Shebbear. The music was composed by Phil Channel. The programme was mixed by Giles Aspen. The editor was Philip Sellers and the commissioning editor was Dan Clark. It's a BBC audio production for BBC Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.
I just would take my glasses off and the executioner would start.
Can you imagine your job being to help legally kill people?
It's a hell of a thing to watch a man die.
I'm Livy Haydock, and I once heard the wildest story about how the USA ran short of death row drugs and had to find them in the UK.
Drugs used in some of the executions are supplied by a British businessman.
That got me digging into what death row looks like now.
Well, they all died. Nobody complained.
And what might happen to it in the future. This is Killing Death Row from BBC Radio 4 with me, Livy Haydock. Listen on BBC Sounds.